The stone loomed like a forgotten god in the heart of Philadelphia. Tall and cracked, draped in ivy and shadow, Eastern State Penitentiary did not simply stand, it brooded. Even now, long after its last prisoner had left, and the final cell had clanged shut in 1971, the air around it was thick with something that defied time. Something waiting. The walls, 30 feet high and made of aging, weather-beaten stone, stretched around the prison like a coffin. Silent. Sealed. A massive Gothic fortress that once held murderers, thieves, and madmen. But the worst thing inside was never the inmates. It was what came later. The first time Grace Dubois saw it, the sun was setting behind the western towers, bleeding red across the broken windows. She stood motionless in the parking lot, with her microphone clipped to her jacket and her handheld camera tilted slightly, catching the light just as it turned gold, and then, suddenly, grey. She whispered to herself almost inaudibly, "What is it about this place?" Beside her, Marcus, the sound tech, was already fumbling with the gear bag, muttering about needing better batteries. The others, Nina the director and Kyle the camera op, were behind her, staring up at the ominous gate where the old prison's iron door was cracked open like the mouth of a sleeping animal. They had come for a documentary, a Halloween special, nothing serious. But nothing about the penitentiary was ever just a show. The crew would stay the night. Cameras rigged in cell block 12, where visitors said the shadows whispered. Another in the chapel, where a volunteer once claimed to see a figure kneeling at the altar, its head bowed, its face missing. A final set would be in death row. No one had ever made it through the night there without leaving mid-recording. Not even once. As Grace walked forward, stepping over the threshold into the cold belly of the place, the air changed. It shifted. Not cooler, not thicker. It was as if she had passed through a veil, something unseen brushing her skin like cobwebs, thin, clinging. And in the silence, a sound, a faint voice, a whisper, right behind her ear. "You came back," she spun. Nothing, just the door swinging slowly behind her, groaning like it hated to let her in. Eastern State Penitentiary opened in 1829, an experiment in pure isolation. No talking, no contact, just stone, silence, and the self. It was the first prison of its kind, with its Pennsylvania system intended to reform the criminal soul through complete solitude. Each cell had a single skylight, what they called the Eye of God, and nothing else. No bars, no shared spaces. Even the chapel was built for one. They called it revolutionary. They didn't realize they were building a tomb. One with breathing walls. As night crept into the corridors and the last light vanished from the rotunda, Grace and her crew began setting up. The prison, now a historic site, had been empty for years except for daytime tours and seasonal events, but not tonight. Tonight it belonged to them. The plan was simple. Record, sleep in shifts. Wake before dawn, piece it together in post. They had no idea they were being watched. At exactly 11:03 p.m., the audio in cell block 4, untouched by human hands, clicked on. It began recording on its own and caught breathing. Deep, ragged, laboured. Marcus swore he hadn't started it. He was with Kyle in the central hub at the time, sipping from a dented thermos and trying to get signal on his phone. But the waveform didn't lie. The audio continued for 3 minutes. Then a voice, grainy, inhuman. Words that twisted out of the silence like something being exhaled after a long, long time. "He still walks here, dragging the chain. He never left." Later, they'd analyze it. They'd run spectral frequencies. But nothing could explain the footsteps that came next. 12 heavy steps. Metal dragging. Then silence. Then laughter. Childlike. Soft. And not alone. Before they arrived, the locals had warned them. Don't stay in cell block 14 after midnight. Watch the mirrors. Don't look too long. If you hear someone knocking from inside a cell, do not open it. But Grace was no amateur. She had filmed in abandoned asylums, cemeteries, catacombs. None of them had left her shaken. Yet this place watched her. Her room was near the old infirmary, one of the few areas cleared for sleeping. Cots were set up, blankets rolled out, one light on, just enough to see the rust stains. She couldn't sleep. The sound came again at 2:14 a.m., faint, like stone scraping stone. She sat up, listened, a door, slamming, then another and another, a wave of echoing iron slamming through the halls. 1, 2, 3, silence, and then the voice again. He's out. The next morning, Nina was missing, her cot untouched, gear bag still zipped, phone left behind. No one had seen her after midnight. They searched. The infirmary, the cell blocks, the tower stairs. Nothing. Then Kyle found her camera at the end of cell block 8, resting on the ground as if she'd placed it down gently before stepping into the dark. The footage, just one thing, a video that began at 12:39 a.m. Nina's face, pale, eyes wide, breathing fast. She whispers into the lens. "There's a man down there. I saw him. He's in stripes, like old prison stripes, and his mouth, static, then screaming, a door slamming, running, then a child's lullaby, soft, off-key, sung in a woman's voice, and then nothing." Eastern State Penitentiary does not let go easily. Its walls have absorbed the grief of nearly 150 years of pain, madness, and silence. Ghosts of inmates, guards, the tortured and the dead. Some say they remain trapped, doomed to walk the cell blocks as punishment for sins long forgotten. Others say the prison itself is alive, breathing, waiting, and feeding. This was only the first night, and it would not be the last. If you're brave enough to return again, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. This is just the beginning. Some doors, once opened, never shut again. The stone remembers. That's what the old caretaker used to say. Not that anyone believed him. He was just another aging man with whiskey breath and dust in his voice, the kind who sat outside the museum gift shop and smoked until his fingers turned the color of coal. But when pressed, when asked why he'd never go past cell block 10 after sunset, he'd mutter it again under his breath. The stone remembers what was done here. It doesn't forgive. Before the ghosts came, before the darkness settled into every crevice like rot behind wallpaper, Eastern State Penitentiary was an idea, a vision, one that would change the world. In 1829, when it first opened, it was the most expensive building ever constructed in the United States. A revolutionary design, sprawling out in 7 radial arms, like the spokes of a wheel, each cell block stretching from the central rotunda, where guards could see all, hear all, control all. No place on earth had ever seen a prison like this. But it was the philosophy that twisted deepest. The Pennsylvania system. Solitary confinement. Complete. Absolute. Eternal. Each prisoner would be sealed alone. No contact. No talking. No shared meals or exercise yards. Hooded when moved. Forgotten when locked in. One man per cell. One soul in silence. One mind left alone with itself and whatever might answer back. They called it rehabilitation. But inside those limestone walls, built from local rock that bled with damp, what they created was something older than punishment, older than law. They built a temple to isolation, and temples need offerings. Grace spent the morning pacing the length of cell block 3, her fingers trailing along the crumbling walls, eyes darting from doorway to doorway. Nina was gone. Not missing in a rational sense. No one believed she had just walked out, but gone in the way that left no footprints, no sound, no evidence but dread. No one wanted to say it aloud, but they were all thinking it. She's still inside. They just didn't know where. Kyle busied himself with the camera systems, reviewing the footage for any sign, any glimpse of her in a hallway or corner. Marcus didn't speak much, but his eyes never left the eastern wing. He swore he saw something in the window of the old chapel. Just for a second. A figure with something long and metal in its hand. A cane, or maybe a shackle. But no one was supposed to be in that wing. No one alive. Back in the 1830s, prisoners arrived in silence. Their heads were covered with thick canvas hoods. They were marched through the echoing corridors in chains, escorted to their cells without ever seeing another human face. Cell 17 in Block 1 was the first to be sealed. Its occupant? A petty thief named Isaac Gray. According to records, he wept for 6 days. On the 7th, he began to whisper to himself, and on the 9th, he stopped eating. They found him curled in the corner, his back against the wall, his eyes wide open, staring up through the eye of God's skylight as though something was looking back. Carved into the floor beneath him were 6 words, scratched deep into the stone with a stolen spoon. He talks to me at night. No one ever found the spoon. They sealed the cell and assigned no one else to it for nearly 2 decades. But Grace, curious, drawn by some invisible thread, found herself standing before that very door by midday. Cell 17. The rusted number was still affixed crookedly above the arch, hanging on by a single screw. The door itself was heavier than the others, metal-plated, pockmarked with age and time, paint peeling like flaking skin. Her breath fogged in the air. It shouldn't have. It was October, yes, but not cold enough for the air to bite like that. Her hand pressed against the handle. It opened on its own, just a crack, just enough to see darkness. A darkness that felt awake. Inside, the air was wrong. Thick. Wet. Not with mold, but with memory. The cell had been cleared decades ago. No bedding, no furniture. Just the rotting stone walls, the fractured floor, and the narrow shaft of light from the ceiling slit above. But someone, or something, had left a mark since. Along the walls were fresh scratches, hundreds of them, fingernail deep, dragging lines from ceiling to floor. They were recent, still white against the darker patina of the wall, still flaking. They had not been here yesterday when the team scouted locations. And on the floor? A word, freshly gouged. Blood. Marcus called out from down the hall, his voice tight. Grace, we have a problem. They all gathered at the rotunda, the central hub of the prison. The heart, as some once called it. Back when the guards stood watch from its platform, watching each corridor like a god staring down from Olympus. Marcus showed her the screens. Camera 5, facing down cell block 14, was glitching. Every 10 minutes the video went static. But not just static. It would twist, swirl, stretch, as though something unseen was crawling over the lens. And in that flicker, that half second between frames, a face, twisted, smiling, wearing a striped uniform. No eyes, but it saw her. Every time they played the footage back, that face was looking straight into the camera. Straight into them. Kyle muttered, voice cracking. Is that Nina? No one answered. They all knew the uniform was wrong. It was older. Too old. Late 19th century. Black and white stripes. From before they moved to the khaki browns. The face didn't belong to anyone on the crew, or anyone alive. As the second night approached, something changed in the air. The prison was growing colder. Lights flickered. Batteries died prematurely. Radios hissed with static that whispered unintelligible syllables. Something ancient had been stirred. Something buried under almost 2 centuries of brick, blood, and sorrow. That night, Grace sat with the Journal of Warden George Washington Smith, who ran the prison in the late 1800s. His final entry read, "The men here weeping through the walls, There's something in cell block 12. It does not eat, does not sleep. It watches. Even I cannot enter without hearing the breath on my neck. We've bricked up 3 cells, but the knocking continues. This place is cursed. We didn't build a prison. We built a temple to loneliness. And something old lives here now. Something hungry. If you ever open it again, God forgive you. At 3:06 a.m., the knocking began. From the bricked-over cells in cell block 12. 3 knocks, then silence. Then, a whisper from every speaker, in unison. Let me out. The lights shut off. The cameras died. And somewhere down the corridor, Nina's voice echoed out of the darkness, soft, trembling, and utterly wrong. I see you. The prison had awoken, and the stone walls, hungry and alive, would not let them go. Not now. Not ever. The dark in Eastern State Penitentiary is not like other darkness. It throbs. It has texture, layered like old velvet soaked in smoke and grief. You feel it press against your face, thick and trembling, until your breath grows shallow, and your thoughts begin to bend around things you can't see. Only feel. And in that kind of dark, fear doesn't come in waves. It drips. Slowly. Ceaselessly. Like water from a pipe in a room with no ceiling, until you're soaked in it and it's too late. Grace hadn't slept. After the second night, after Nina's voice came through the speakers, soft and fractured, I see you. There was no longer any illusion that this was still a film project. The others had stopped pretending too. Marcus stopped speaking entirely, choosing instead to sit in the rotunda with his back against the wall, headphones still around his neck, but no longer connected to anything. Kyle kept filming. That was the strangest part. Even after they found the brick dust, fresh, outside cell block 12, even after the temperature in that corridor dropped to 32 degrees, breath hanging in the air despite no open windows, despite the central heating still functioning in the rest of the structure. Even after they saw the shadows move, he kept filming. Cell block 12. In the early days, it was reserved for the mentally unstable, the whisperers, as guards called them, the ones who would claw at their own ears, the ones who were so deep in the Pennsylvania system that they began speaking in reverse, laughing in silence, scratching symbols into the stone with nothing but bone and blood. When the prison closed in 1971, the city sealed off cell block 12 entirely, not because of structure issues, because of what the last guard saw. His name was Edwin Mallory, a night watchman who served the final shift before closure. On October 30th, 1971, he wrote a single sentence in the guard log before walking into the block and never returning. I can hear the boy again. They found the logbook, but never Edwin. The entrance to cell block 12 had been bricked up 2 weeks later. Until now. Because sometime during the night, someone, or something, had broken it open from the inside. The dust was fresh. The bricks lay in pieces on the ground, and the darkness behind that door breathed. Grace stood in front of the entrance the next morning. The camera shook slightly in her hands. She wasn't filming. She didn't know why she was holding it. The smell was the first thing. Not rot, not mildew, but earth, wet earth, soil disturbed, graves turned over. She crouched low, clicking on the camera's night vision, and aimed it into the mouth of cell block 12. Nothing. And then, movement, fast, at the edge of the frame, a flicker, like someone ducking into a cell, and the sound, drip, drip, drip. It echoed faintly, as if coming from dozens of feet away. But then it was behind her, then to the left, then above. She stepped back, instinctively. The camera jolted, static. Then, for just a moment, the image stabilized, and a face filled the screen. No eyes, mouth stitched shut, skin pale and paper thin, hands pressed to the inside of the lens as if trying to reach through it. She dropped the camera. When she picked it up again, the feed was blank. Marcus finally spoke around noon. He hadn't eaten, hadn't moved much, just stared into the central rotunda with eyes that no longer blinked enough. He'd started drawing symbols on his palms with a Sharpie. Grace didn't notice at first, until she caught the pattern. The symbols were matching the carvings inside cell 17. Lines with perfect curvature, not random. And in the center of his palm, in shaky capital letters, "Still here." When she asked him why, he whispered, "He follows the loneliest one. You should stop looking." At 2:37 p.m., the temperature dropped again, this time in every cell block, simultaneously. 15 degrees in under 2 minutes. Kyle's camera picked up movement again, this time in the hallway outside the old kitchen. He replayed the tape for Grace with a finger trembling over the pause button. The footage was dark, grainy, but unmistakable. A figure moved on all fours, jerking with unnatural angles, dragging itself out of cell block 6. It had no legs, just arms, longer than they should be, bending like the legs of an insect, fingers dragging behind it like broken tools. When it passed under the broken light, it stopped, lifted its head, and smiled at the camera, its mouth stitched shut. They left the rotunda an hour later. They didn't speak. Grace carried the old keys she'd taken from the office archive, a ring of rusted iron marked with etched block numbers and dates. One of them, larger than the others, was marked Block 12, Ward G. Ward G didn't exist on any map, not in the archives, not on blueprints, but the key fit a side cell door just past the first cell in the corridor, the one where the brick had caved inward, as if something inside had pushed out. Inside was a chair, just a chair, old, wooden, cracked, and a length of chain bolted to the floor. The links were smeared with something black, not paint, not old rust, and on the wall, scratched deep with what must have been fingernails over the course of years. He sits in silence. He waits for someone to speak. If you answer him, he wears your voice. Grace turned back to Marcus. He wasn't there. The corridor was empty, no footsteps, no sound. She called his name, once, then again. Only the echoes returned, but not hers, someone else's voice mimicking her tone perfectly. "Marcus, are you there? Marcus, are you there? Marcus, are you there?" 3 times, each one closer. Kyle grabbed her by the arm. They ran. The sun had begun to fall behind the prison's silhouette again. Its last light bled across the upper towers, turning the empty windows black. Kyle vomited behind the chapel. Grace clutched the journal, the one she had found in the hidden room behind the warden's office, locked with that strange iron key, the one marked WG Scribe. Inside were only pages torn from logbooks, sketches of cells, numbers circled over and over, and a single list of names. Isaac Gray, Richard Toll, Edwin Mallory, Grace Dubois. Only one name wasn't from the past. That night, Grace dreamed of cell block 12. In the dream, the door opened by itself. Inside, a man in stripes stood with his back to her, chains around his neck, hands clasped before him like he was praying. He turned slowly, and when he looked at her, it was Marcus's face. His mouth moved, but the voice was Nina's. "We told you not to open the door." She woke up screaming, and cell block 12's lights were on. Despite no power in that wing, Eastern State had fed on centuries of silence, and now that silence had split open, the voices were loose, and they were wearing familiar faces, waiting, smiling. At 3:33 a.m., the silence shattered. Not with a bang, not with a scream, but with a single, perfectly pitched piano note, echoing through the penitentiary like a memory rising from under skin. Grace sat bolt upright. The others stirred in the infirmary, their makeshift beds scattered under broken fluorescent lights and graffiti-covered walls. Dust hung in the air, like floating ash. but none of them moved toward the sound, because they all knew. There was no piano in Eastern State Penitentiary. Not anymore. Back in 1873, Cell Block 3 held a music room, one of the rare humanity efforts funded by a philanthropist who insisted prisoners' souls could be softened through melody. But it was shut down within 2 years. The guards complained of waking in the night to hear the instruments playing themselves. Inmates reported songs no one taught them. Melodies they claimed had lyrics only they could hear. One inmate clawed out his own eardrums to make the music stop. His name, Daniel Crowthorne. His final words before collapsing from blood loss were recorded in the warden's notes. The piano man plays only for the hollow ones. His fingers are bone. His keys are ribs. That wing was sealed, the piano removed, or so they thought. Grace stood in the hallway outside the infirmary, the beam of her flashlight trembling. The sound came again, another piano note. Soft, slow, deliberate. F-L, followed by A, then D, 3 notes. A minor chord, the kind that sounds like a warning whispered through a locked door. And then, silence. A breathing silence. Kyle emerged from the side hallway. His camera was already recording, though he hadn't pushed the button. It had turned on by itself. Again, he looked thinner, paler, like the prison had begun to eat him. He didn't speak. He just pointed down the hall, toward the old chapel. A faint light flickered inside, like candlelight. Flickering amber shadows danced across the arched window, but no one had lit candles. And the chapel had been locked since 1979. Yet the door stood open. And inside, the piano was back. It stood crooked in the corner, covered in dust, its lid open as though recently played. Keys yellowed, chipped. A single drop of something dark stained the highest note. A fresh impression sat in the bench's dust, as if someone had just risen and walked away. Grace took a cautious step forward. The air in the room was warm. Too warm. Her breath caught. Not from fear, but from recognition. Etched into the wood above the piano, shallow but precise, was her name. Grace. Nothing else, no dates, no titles, just her name, carved by a trembling hand, lettered in a strange, almost mirror-reversed script. She backed away slowly. Kyle raised the camera. It died instantly. Battery, 83%. Screen, black. The candles blew out, all at once. And from the center of the chapel, a voice whispered, not in the air, but inside her head, "Your place has been prepared." That night, Marcus returned. They found him kneeling in cell 44, just beyond the edge of the reopened cell block 12 corridor. He was naked, except for an old striped prison shirt. Where he found it, no one knew, and his fingernails were black, cracked, bloody. He had carved something on the walls, hundreds of repetitions of one word, over and over and over. Return. And beneath it, in larger letters, they never left. Grace tried to speak to him, but he only rocked back and forth, whispering to himself in that same backwards lilted tone that once echoed in the early solitary wings. "Ei tonod sujdna tiao." Kyle stared too long, far too long, and then something broke inside him. Later that evening, Kyle was found inside the shower corridor, one of the most haunted sections of the penitentiary, known for the stories of unseen hands grabbing ankles, pulling visitors into the dark. The showers were carved directly into the stone, deep pits with rusting nozzles and ancient pipes that hissed with the memory of water. Kyle had removed the grate from one drain. His camera was pointed directly down into it. The feed showed nothing but blackness. But the audio played the same 3 notes over and over. F4, AD, and behind them, breathing. Then a laugh, Nina's laugh. Soft, childlike, but with something stretched behind it, like a smile that had been held too long. Kyle was unresponsive. He would not speak. He had clawed a single message into the tile beneath the drain with the edge of his camera lens. She sings through the pipes now. The night grew deeper, and Eastern State Penitentiary began to close its grip. Doors that once opened easily now resisted, even under pressure. Tools failed, lights flickered, clocks ticked backward. The cell walls seemed to pulse slightly, as if the stone itself had developed a heartbeat. Grace huddled near the rotunda, cradling the journal she had stolen from the warden's hidden room. She flipped to the last page. There was a note scrawled in an unfamiliar jittery hand. Something like chalk, something faint and recent. No one escapes who hears their name. Below it, 2 names had been added, Kyle M., Marcus R., and below that, still etched deeper, was Grace D. Then a final note in the margin. There is no door in, there is no door out, only walls, and behind each wall, a mouth. That night, the prison moaned, not the wind, not the walls creaking, a moan, long, deep, as if the building itself had taken a breath, and then screams, not just one, not 2, dozens, echoing down the halls in every direction, some high and frantic, some low and guttural, some crying, some laughing, and one that called her name, not like a ghost, not like a threat, but like a mother calling her child home. Grace. It's time. She rose. The light above the rotunda went out. The corridor to cell block 12 opened, slowly, with a grinding of stone on stone, and the walls began to whisper. Hundreds of voices, repeating the same phrase, "We never left. We never left. We never left." She stepped forward, and behind her, the door to the prison slammed shut. Far below, deeper than any map had ever shown, the air stirred in Ward G. Chains shifted. A face turned toward the ceiling, smiling. When a door slams in Eastern State Penitentiary, it doesn't echo. It lands, like a stone lid on a coffin, like finality. Grace turned too slowly. She already knew it had locked. That sound was unmistakable. Ancient iron latching into corroded sockets, a sound older than the warping wood and weathered brick around her. She was no longer inside a prison. She was under it, even if her feet still touched the floor. The silence that followed was listening. The corridor to cell block 12 yawned before her, deeper now, impossibly long. The geometry had shifted. She could feel it in her bones. Every step was heavier, not from fatigue but from gravity itself. The air had thickened. Moisture clung to her lips, and in it the faintest taste of copper. Blood, not fresh, not violent, but old, aged, like blood trapped in wet stone, waiting centuries to be tasted again. The flashlight in her hand flickered. She didn't bother shaking it. It wouldn't help. This place did not want light. To her left, the bricked-over cell door Marcus had been kneeling before was open, completely open. The bricks themselves lay untouched, still mortared into place. The doorway had moved, somehow bypassed the wall entirely, as though the stone had rewritten itself, inviting her inside. She leaned in. No camera, no map, just instinct. And the sound, a sound so quiet she wasn't sure it existed, of pages turning in the dark. Not fast, slow, deliberate. Someone reading, or something. The room was deeper than it should have been, wider. Cell 44 was only supposed to be 6 feet by 10, barely enough for a cot, a toilet, and a wall to cry against. But this space was 20 feet across, circular. The ceiling curved into a dome, and on that ceiling, names. Carved into the stone, thousands of names spiraled toward the apex, starting wide at the base and coiling upward in tighter, sharper rings. She recognized some immediately. Isaac Gray, Edwin Mallory, Nina Caldwell, Marcus Reed, Kyle Maddox, her name, twice, once near the outer ring, and again at the center, where a hole had been drilled directly through the stone, so small she might have missed it if not for the cold breath that rose from it, as if the hole inhaled. She stepped closer. The breath stopped. Something in the hole had noticed her. Then came the voice. Not from the hole, not from the air, from the walls. "You have entered Ward G." It was not a statement, not a warning. It was a confirmation, like an intake form being signed in blood. The walls trembled softly, almost imperceptibly. The carvings in the stone pulsed faintly, the names shifting slightly in the shadows, never when she looked directly at them, only in the corner of her eye. She ran her fingers along the name etched deepest. Grace Dubois. Below it, a date, October 3rd, 2025. Today. Something wet dripped behind her. She turned. The corridor she'd entered from was gone, replaced by another cell, this one glowing faintly red, as if lit by coals far beneath the floor. Inside, a man sat against the wall, eyes closed, head bowed. He was wearing a prison uniform, black and white stripes, but the stripes didn't stop. They continued into his skin, carved like burns, coiling around his limbs like branding marks. His face, Marcus's face, but hollow, pale, wrong. The voice came again. He answered. He asked what was behind the wall. Now he sees. The man opened his eyes. They were missing, not gouged, not torn, just gone, smooth skin stretched over where sockets should have been, eyelids twitching as if trying to blink through memory. His mouth opened, sewn, with hair, human hair, knotted tight through the lips. He didn't speak, but the wall behind him did. It whispered, dozens of voices layered into one. We called, you came, now you must remember. Sit, listen. The stone in the center of the floor shifted. A chair rose. Wooden, same as the one in cell 17. But this one had arms and metal restraints affixed to both. The leather was fresh, still warm. Grace didn't move. The breath returned from the hole in the ceiling. Not cold now, hot, wet, sweet, like something exhaling directly into her mouth. She staggered back. Her heel hit something soft. She turned, expecting empty space. Instead, Nina, or what had once been Nina. She stood, face covered in black soot, eyes glowing red, her mouth a perfect O like a ventriloquist dummy waiting for activation. When she spoke, it came from beneath her feet. It wears me now. It wore them all. It's still so hungry. Grace fled. The walls stretched as she ran, elongating like a nightmare, each step landing on wet stone that pulsed under her shoes like muscle. The cells she passed weren't empty anymore. In each, a version of herself sat alone. One gnawed at her fingers. One sang to the eye of God's skylight, throat bloody from screaming. One stared directly at her with empty sockets, smiling. Each whispered the same thing. You were always here. You were never real. She finally collapsed in the rotunda. Only it wasn't the rotunda. It was a mirror of it. Wrong angles. 8 arms instead of 7. And in the center, a pulpit, like a church. Behind it stood the figure, the one they'd seen in the footage. The striped man. Skin blistered white. Face cracked like old porcelain, mouth a stitched grin. He held a ring of keys in one hand and a noose in the other. From his chest hung a name tag. Warden. He spoke, not with a voice, but with the collapse of silence. You unlocked it. Now you belong to the stone. Chains rose from the floor, around her ankles, around her wrists, around her throat, and then, just as the chains tightened, the rotunda flickered. Lights. Real lights. The real rotunda. Kyle stood over her, slapping her face, his voice panicked. Grace, wake up! Grace, Jesus, wake up! She gasped, blinking against the light. Dust swirled around her. No pulpit, no warden, but the chains were still on her wrists. She didn't tell him what she saw. She didn't tell him she heard Nina laughing from the hole in the ceiling, or that Marcus had whispered her name from behind the wall, or that her own name was etched at the center of Ward G's dome, waiting to be filled. She just whispered, "We need to leave. Now." But Kyle didn't answer. His eyes were wide, staring behind her, where the real cell block 12 had just opened again, and in the doorway the striped man stood, grinning, holding a key. There are moments when the body recognizes death before the mind does, before thought, before reaction, before fear becomes scream. Grace did not scream when she saw the striped man standing in the open mouth of cell block 12. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She froze, because every inch of her skin suddenly remembered being hunted. It was as if something ancient had awakened inside her nerves, something primal that whispered, "Don't move. If you move, it sees." The figure in the doorway did not advance. He just stood there, motionless, draped in that same striped uniform, more rag than cloth, skin stretched thin and wet like wax left too long in heat. His mouth didn't move, but the lines where lips should have been curled upward slightly. Not a smile, something older, worse. Kyle began to shake. His lips parted. His breath came in fast gasps, shallow and wheezing. "That's not real," he muttered. "That's not him. That's not even a person." Grace stepped in front of him instinctively, but the striped man didn't move. Not yet. He just lifted the key. It hung from a rusted iron ring, etched with a crude number, 777. She didn't know why, but she understood what it meant. That wasn't a key to any cell. It was the key to Ward G. Eastern State Penitentiary was always about control. Control through silence. Control through separation. Control through unseen eyes and unheard screams. But there was one part of the prison never spoken of. Not in the tours, not in the records. An unofficial wing, built beneath the stone. Not for inmates, for something else. The inmates who went in never returned. And the guards who escorted them were never seen again. They called it Ward G only in passing, in whispers, in warnings carved into the underside of bunks and inside hidden crevices of the mess hall. One message was found by a maintenance worker in 1953, scrawled beneath a stairwell. "Do not follow the striped man. He opens the wrong doors." The striped man dropped the key. It struck the stone with a sharp clink. And the moment it did, the prison changed. The lights went out. The air turned wet. And from every corridor, the whispering began again, this time in sync. Not chaotic, not overlapping. One voice, through 100 mouths, male, female, child, old, but always the same words. Let the stone remember. Let her descend. She opened the first door. She must open the last. Kyle collapsed. His knees gave out like something had taken the strength from him. Grace caught him by the shoulders, but he just stared at her with wide, wet eyes, whispering, "It's in me now. I hear her singing in my blood." He lifted a hand. His veins had darkened, not blue, black. They pulsed in patterns beneath the skin, like roots growing through the flesh. Grace didn't have time to think, because the striped man moved. He didn't walk. He slid, gliding across the stone without bending his knees, without lifting his feet. Every light fixture above him shattered as he passed beneath. Sparks rained in his wake, and wherever his fingers dragged the walls, the stone burned black. Grace pulled Kyle to his feet. He was dead weight, murmuring, weeping, bleeding from the eyes now. She grabbed the key. It was warm, wet, pulsing, like something alive. She turned and ran. Back through the rotunda, past the central hub, down the museum wing, through the staff corridor. Every wall seemed to breathe. Every step echoed with laughter. Nina's laughter. childlike, spiraling upward into something insectile. Grace didn't stop, not even when the cells began to open around her. One by one, the heavy iron doors swung wide on hinges that hadn't moved in decades, and inside each, a version of herself, more decayed, more hollow, each wearing her face like a mask stitched too tightly to a skull. They didn't scream. They didn't chase. They just watched and whispered. Unlock it. Free him. Be the last. She made it to the old archive office, where it all began, where she first found the journal, where she first touched the wrong key. The walls here were less decayed, less haunted, but not untouched. On the centre of the back wall, where once a filing cabinet stood, the plaster had peeled away, revealing old original brick. And burned into that brick, deep, scorched black, was a door. Not a door in form, a door in symbol, an arch with no handle, no hinges, just a shape, and beneath it, freshly carved, 777. Her hand moved on its own. The key in her fingers vibrated. Once. Twice. And then it melted. A warm flow of liquid iron that dripped between her fingers and seeped into the symbol on the wall. The brick cracked, and the wall opened. Behind it was a staircase. Stone. Wet. Descending. No lights. No sound. Just waiting. Grace turned to Kyle. His eyes were black now. He smiled, but it wasn't his smile. We've been waiting for you. Go on. He needs to see you. And then he began to laugh. The same dead mechanical giggle Nina had made before she disappeared. Grace took a breath, stepped down, and behind her the wall sealed. There are no records of what lies beneath Eastern State's lowest level. No blueprints, no access routes, only rumours about a room that was never listed, built before the prison opened. Stone laid with no official contractor. A foundation set by hands no one could trace. They say it was the first room ever built on the site. The prison rose around it, like skin around a tumour. A place called, in the original design notes, the listening cell, where no one went. But something always waited. Grace descended 77 steps. She counted. Not out of fear, but because the walls were counting with her, whispering each number into her ears. Soft, wet, loving. And at the bottom, a single chamber, circular, stone, one chair, facing a wall with no features, no symbols, no cracks, just smooth, wet blackness. The stone shimmered, and then, without turning, the wall spoke, not from itself, but from every direction at once. You are the last. You carry the name. Sit. Remember. She did. The moment she touched the chair, the stone pulsed, and images flooded her. Not memories, possessions. She saw the original architect of the prison, John Haviland, kneeling in this very room, writing the first name in blood. She saw the warden in 1904, dragging a boy in shackles down these same stairs, whispering an apology. She saw guards bringing inmates down in secret during full moons, 7 at a time, always 7. She saw herself, again and again, different lifetimes, same face, standing in front of the wall, and always, the striped man behind her, smiling. Then the wall cracked, not open, inward, like it was drawing breath. A hand reached through, long, pale, wrapped in chains. It didn't grab her, it pointed, to her chest, and in her chest, something answered, a sound, like a key turning inside her own ribs, a whisper from inside her lungs. Grace, you opened all the doors. Now you are the door. The last thing she saw was the wall swallowing her name, pulling it off her skin like peeling bark. The last thing she felt was silence, perfect, endless, alive. Above, in the rotunda, Kyle stood alone, eyes black, mouth split too wide, and behind him, from every corridor, the laughter began again. The striped man watched from the tower window, smiling. The prison sighed. and waited for the next one. The silence didn't end. It evolved. Down where Grace had vanished, beneath Eastern State's oldest stones, the quiet was not the absence of sound. It was the sound reversed, pulled inward, like screams swallowed before they could be born. Up above, the prison felt it. The walls shivered, the cell doors breathed, the rotunda flickered with a light that hadn't worked in 50 years. Kyle stood still at its center, his body upright, unmoving, like a broken marionette held in place by some unseen wire. The veins in his arms still black, tracing ancient patterns across his skin. Sigils, perhaps. Letters. Maybe even names. And though his lips were unmoving, his mouth was open. Wide, far too wide. And something inside, deeper than a throat should go, hummed. Not a song, not a voice, but a frequency, a tone that should not exist, one that didn't fill the air but pressed against it, vibrating through stone and sinew, resonating with the very blueprint of the building. And from the furthest wing, cell block 14, something responded. A whisper, a footstep, a second hum. Grace was coming back. But it wasn't Grace anymore. The camera Kyle left on the floor flickered to life. It had been dead since cell block 6, its battery drained when the striped man had passed through. But now, the feed returned. Automatically. The lens cracked, the date stamp flashing, 0. And through it, the rotunda appeared empty. No Kyle, no lights, just shadows moving in slow patterns, circles within circles. Then a figure stepped into frame. Grace, or rather, what wore her shape. Her movements were slow, liquid, as if her joints were no longer bones but water under skin. Her eyes reflected no light. Her mouth hung slightly open, twitching like it hadn't remembered how to smile. She stood at the edge of the rotunda and whispered something. The mic didn't pick it up. But on the floor, the dust shifted. Words formed. Open another! In 1937, 4 inmates disappeared without a trace. No break in the walls, no tools, no guards missing. Just 4 empty cells. The investigation yielded only one clue. A drawing carved into the floor of cell 73, beneath a broken bed frame. A spiral, made of faces, and at the center, a figure drawn in simple lines. A person with no mouth and no eyes, arms outstretched, wearing a striped uniform and a crown of nails. Below it, the stone cannot speak, but it listens. The drawing was buried by prison staff. But after the penitentiary closed, it came back, etched into new walls, scratched into the backs of old tour brochures, photographed by tourists who never saw it in person, like it wanted to be seen. Kyle began to move again. His steps echoed in ways they shouldn't. He walked toward the chapel, slow and steady, like he was being drawn. The camera feed followed him automatically, glitching slightly, as if reality itself had become corrupted. When he opened the chapel, doors! The piano was playing, but no one was there. Each note struck precisely, intentionally. A funeral waltz. The same chord over and over again. F's, A-D. He sat in the front pew and whispered, "She remembers everything. Even the lives she never lived. Even the ones we didn't give her." Behind him, in the shadows of the altar, something rose. It had Grace's shape, but its mouth was sewn with keys. Its fingers were lengths of broken chain. And its eyes, they weren't just black, they were mirrors. That same night, across town, the Eastern State Penitentiary live feed page went live on its own. No one at the historic site knew why. They weren't running any events. There was no scheduled stream. But over 300 people logged in. They saw cell block 12, lit in pale white, the camera unmanned, and at the end of the hall, facing away from the lens, sat a woman in a striped dress, a modern dress, not prison-issued, hair long and black, skin pale. Grace. She turned once. Her mouth moved. No sound came through, but thousands of users typed what they thought she said. And disturbingly, most of them typed the same phrase. "We are already behind the walls." Then the stream cut. The next morning, the tour guides at Eastern State found something new. The wall near the museum entrance had changed. A crack had formed overnight. Long, vertical, precise. Not weather damage, not age. A door shape, and burned into the stone beside it. Ward H. But there was no Ward H, no record, no plan, no blueprints ever listed it. Yet the door remained, waiting. And beside it, a single object, a key, larger than the others, etched with 8888. Down below, beneath the lowest level of the prison, in the chamber where Grace had vanished, the chair sat empty now. But the wall was open, a tunnel, pulsing, alive, wet, and crawling from it, slow and careful, came another Grace, identical, unblinking, smiling too wide. In her hand, her left hand, she held a lock of black hair, not her own, and behind her, from the tunnel, a new voice whispered, "Now we build the next wing. Now we carve a home in you. Now you carry the stone." Up in the tower, behind the shattered glass, the striped man stared down at the yard, motionless, watching, and at his feet something breathed, a map, drawn in chalk, of the prison, and under it, veins, spreading, growing, and at the center of the veins, Grace's name, crossed out, and rewritten, "Gatekeeper, the prison will not release her, because it doesn't need to. She is part of it now. She is another room, another mouth, another echo in the wall, and the walls are getting louder. If you listen carefully, between the winds that snake through Eastern State's shattered towers, beneath the hum of dead wires and flickering bulbs, you'll hear it. Footsteps that do not echo, not boots, not shoes, but bare feet, soft, damp, dragging slightly, hundreds of them, walking in circles, just beneath the stone. The morning after the 888 door appeared, the first reports came in. Tourists claimed to hear knocking behind the walls. Not unusual. This was Eastern State, after all. That was part of the experience. But this time, the knocks were rhythmic, repeating 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, and then whispers. She brought it up with her. The wall is breathing again. The old ones are waking. By mid-afternoon, a guide, Ellen Trevors, 29, employed since 2017, was found huddled in the corner of the rotunda, weeping and clutching a shard of glass. She had carved 7 eyes into her left arm, and a single phrase into her right. I saw her reflection in the floor, but she was smiling at something behind me. That night, the power cut, all of it. No explanation, no storm, no tripped lines, just darkness, deep and absolute. And when it came, the prison's newer sections, those renovated for tours and Halloween attractions, went quiet. Too quiet, as if the silence had been absorbed, trapped, and in that choking black, 3 security cameras switched on by themselves, not part of any feed, not connected to any system, but still, recording, and what they captured was never released. But one intern at the Historic Society leaked a single image, a grainy still from cell block 7, 2 figures, one standing, one crawling, both wearing Grace's face. No one has entered Ward H yet. No one living anyway. The key still hangs beside the new door, larger than the rest, cold, heavy, with something like pulse inside it. But below the prison, something waits, and it isn't patient anymore. In 1909, an undocumented wing was discovered beneath the west courtyard. 7 cells arranged in a spiral. No records, no blueprints. Just a single name scratched into each wall, followed by the number 888. The area was resealed. No investigation followed. But the letters found near the excavation, written by Warden Billings, contained chilling insight. I don't know who built it. I don't know when. But they're not cells. Not really. They're shrines. And the names on the walls, they match people who died before the prison even opened. The stones know more than we do. I think they always have. I hear them sometimes at night. Not voices, just a heartbeat. But it's not mine. It's deeper, slower. And I'm afraid if I listen too long, it'll stop pretending to be inside the walls and start beating inside me. Up in the tower, the striped man moved for the first time in 3 days. He left behind a trail of soot where his feet touched. He did not descend the stairs. He simply appeared at the center of the rotunda, and with him came the smell. It filled the halls in seconds. Rotten flowers, burnt silk, milk left too long in bone. Visitors gagged. Some fled. Others fell silent and wept, for no reason they could name. One woman whispered, "My mother used to wear that perfume, but she's been dead for 40 years. Another said, "That's what it smelled like the night my brother drowned." None of them had ever met. None had been told what was coming. They all knew the scent, because it was memory, burned and exhaled, and it had a message. The door is opening. Meanwhile, Grace's new shape moved through the corridors without sound. Her steps did not disturb the dust. Her breath did not fog the air. She moved like someone who already knew the path, because it wasn't her walking. It was the prison, wearing her, testing its new skin. One guide caught a glimpse of her near cell 2, the first occupied cell in the prison's history. He said, "She stopped walking, looked straight at me, but not like she saw me, as if she saw through me. And then she spoke. She said my name." He'd never met her. He wore no badge, no ID visible, and yet she knew his name. The spiral pattern returned, scratched into walls, etched into fogged windows, and at the center of each spiral, the number 888, not graffiti, not vandalism, but invitations. You see, each number means something different in the layers beneath Eastern State. 777, passage to Ward G, the gate of silence and memory. 888, passage to Ward H, the gate of return. 999, no one knows what comes next, but it's carved on the back of the warden's chair. And in Grace's journal, now missing, every page ends with that number, even the blank ones. The security guard who tried to remove the 8888 key lasted 3 minutes. He screamed the moment his hand touched it, not in pain, in revelation. There are others in the walls. They're still dreaming. They want out, but they don't remember who they were. She does. She remembers all of them. That night, in a rarely used basement wing, a wall collapsed, and inside, a stairwell. Old, older than the penitentiary, rough-hewn, descending, and etched into the first step. The ones who came before built this place not to hold the guilty, but to trap the forgotten. There were footprints in the dust, but none leading down, only up. When the paranormal investigators arrived 2 days later, they laughed, at first. They brought EMF readers, thermal scanners, EVP equipment, the standard. They stayed less than 45 minutes. Their footage was unreleased. But one of them, off the record, said this. "We heard a woman singing, 'Ring Around the Rosie,' but it wasn't her voice. It was like 100 voices layered together, grinding against each other. And it was coming from inside the walls, not down the hall, not around the corner. Inside the goddamn walls. One of them never came out. He wasn't seen on camera. His name was Michael Day. But a week later, his driver's license was found embedded in the stone of cell 88. There was no opening, no crack, no seam, just his photo, staring back from the concrete. And when they chipped away the wall to retrieve it, it bled. The striped man now stands in 3 places at once. Visitors have seen him near the warden's office, on the chapel altar, and at the center of cell block 12, all at the same time. He no longer wears chains, just a crown of keys. And Grace? She hasn't spoken in days, but the walls speak for her. She is the voice in the silence now. She is the key in the door no one remembers unlocking. She is the dream the stone keeps dreaming. And soon, the next wing will be built, not underground, not behind a wall, but inside someone. Maybe you, maybe soon. The prison is always growing, even if it doesn't look like it. If you hear your own voice behind you, don't turn around. That was rule number 6, carved in old chalk behind the filing cabinets in the abandoned Eastern Records room. The chalk had bled into the wall, forming permanent stains, like memory scorched into flesh. The note wasn't signed. None of them were, but there were always 7. And now only one remained unfulfilled. 7. If the wall opens for you, do not enter. It's not the first time it's done that. It's just the first time it asked. The 888 door finally opened on its own. No hand turned the key. No camera caught the moment. But that morning, when staff returned to sweep and inspect, the bricks were gone. Not broken, not crumbled. Gone. Like breath in winter air. And in its place, an archway carved from black stone, smooth as obsidian, cold as ice pulled from a glacier's heart. Above it, nothing, no sign, no name. But as one tour guide stood before the arch, she swore she heard 7 names whispered beneath her feet. Only 2 were confirmed. Grace Dubois, Michael Day. The others were illegible, but one sounded disturbingly like her own. Deep beneath the penitentiary, the new wing pulsed, not with blood, but with remembrance. Walls lined with shelves of mouths, rows of them, petrified and silent, sealed shut with lengths of wire and chain. Each mouth held a tooth not belonging to the person it once fed. The floor was made of epitaphs etched in stone, not of the dead, not yet, of the missing, people who vanished in Eastern States history, visitors, vagrants, guards, even children, names that were never made public. But Grace remembered, because she carried the memories now, because she was the mortar that bound this place together. When the new tourists arrived that weekend, unaware, excited, thinking they were visiting a haunted house for thrills and selfies, they noticed something strange in the air. Not the typical smell of old stone and mildew, but flowers, sickly sweet, wilting roses, lilies, something fermented beneath perfume. Some began to cry. Some began to choke. One man dropped to his knees and vomited, and in his vomit were fragments of paper. When collected, dried, and arranged, they formed a page from Grace's journal. It's no longer memory, it's intention. The prison doesn't remember what we did. It decides what happens next. We are not just ghosts in its dream. We are the bricks. That evening, they heard the knocking again, not the random taps of bad plumbing or wind through stone, but deliberate, rehearsed, musical, 7 knocks, then silence, then one long drag across the wall, and from somewhere beneath the chapel, a voice said, "Ready." And then another voice, her voice, said, "Begin." The doors in cell block 3 swung open simultaneously, only for 12 seconds. Long enough for the prisoners inside, the mannequins used for historical recreation, to fall. Not tip, not slide, fall, as though pushed, as though released. Staff reviewed the tapes. There was a glitch, yes, but in the moment, just before the mannequins dropped, a shape flickered in the footage, human-sized, inverted, like a negative of a person, outlined in heat, but colder than death. And when the frame was isolated, enhanced, brightened, the shape had no face, only a mirror, reflecting whoever was watching. That same night, the rotunda clock began to run backward. Not just a metaphor, literally. The hands reversed, slowly ticking against time, and above the clock, new words appeared, burned into the stone. The memory has awakened. The stone will rebuild. Grace, The echo, the vessel, the gatekeeper, stood in the central corridor. She hadn't moved in hours. Her arms were stretched wide, palms facing the floor. Chains hung from her shoulders, not binding her, but connecting her to the ceiling. And from her mouth spilled a low chant, rhythmic, full of breath but no language. The sound spread through the walls. Each syllable embedded itself into the stone. And with each syllable, the cracks in the prison deepened, but did not collapse. The prison wasn't dying, it was stretching. Like a creature waking from hibernation, making room. In 1946, there was an event no one ever talks about. 6 inmates went silent, all in different blocks. They didn't eat, didn't move, didn't blink. Doctors were brought in, nothing helped. Until one day, they all said the same thing. We remember who we are now, and then they carved themselves into the wall. Not their names, their bodies, perfect outlines, and inside each outline, their names reversed, written in letters that looped like spirals. They weren't buried, they weren't mourned, they were sealed, and now, those carvings are gone. The outlines erased, the names scratched out, because they got back up. Security guards have begun resigning in droves. One woman, Chelsea Morris, a senior night shift leader, left behind only a note taped to her locker. It read, "The walls touched me. I don't mean that metaphorically. They touched me. I think they liked the sound of my name. They held it. And now when I sleep, I can feel it whispering to me from somewhere under my ribs. I'm not staying. I'm not becoming part of the stone." And still, the spiral spreads. Visitors now walk in unintentional loops, returning to corridors they never entered. Doors open to different rooms than where they were last seen. And in every mirror, a crack forms. The same crack. Top right to bottom left. Diagonal, sharp, deliberate. And behind that crack, always the same image. Grace, smiling, but with someone else's eyes, not watching you, watching what's behind you. Ward H is no longer a secret. The prison has stopped hiding it. Now it beckons. Anyone who stands near the entrance too long begins to feel called. Like something in. Their blood is answering an echo they never knew existed. Something older than guilt, older than crime, older than penitence. Something that doesn't punish you for who you are, but for who you were supposed to be, and for what the stone had to become instead. And above it all, in the tower, the striped man stands alone, holding a final key, no number, no label, just a whisper carved into its shaft. This one is for the one who listens. You've been listening, and the prison has noticed. The spiral is forming in your thoughts. Can you feel it? Turn around. By now, the spiral is complete, carved in every wall, etched into memory itself, whispered by graves that were never dug. Eastern State Penitentiary no longer remembers its purpose. It no longer remembers prisoners or punishments. Now it remembers only one thing: names, and the debt each name carries. The morning began without a sun. The sky above Philadelphia grew dim instead of bright. Not dark, not quite, but pale, anemic. Like daylight filtered through bone and salt. Inside the prison, the temperature dropped to 0 degrees. Every corridor, every cell, simultaneously. The heat system functioned. The thermostat showed 70 degrees Celsius. But the frost still spread. Not from cold, from remembrance. 3 tourists were found unconscious in cell block 2. All 3 were lying in the same position, on their backs, hands folded over their chests. Not a bruise, not a wound. But their eyes were gone, not taken, refused, sealed shut beneath skin, as if their bodies had forgotten they ever needed to see, and branded on their necks, written in fine lines of red, not the ones. At the same time, Grace moved again. Her body, no longer hers, walked calmly through the infirmary, barefoot, trailing chains of hair behind her like smoke. Visitors gasped. Some tried to approach her, but no one could cross the threshold of the hallway she entered. Because as she walked, the walls followed her. The bricks shifted, reshaping the corridor. Each time her foot fell, the path behind her vanished, swallowed into the growing pulse of the building. She was leading something, or someone, or everyone, to the center, to the place where it began, where the prison wasn't yet a prison, where it was still hungry. Ward H was no longer hidden. It became the only path. The walls rerouted themselves. Hallways reversed. Maps failed. Everyone inside the structure, visitors, staff, guards, found themselves walking toward Ward H without knowing why. It wasn't coercion, it was gravity. Meanwhile, above, in the watchtower, the striped man descended for the final time. Only he wasn't alone anymore. 7 others followed behind him. Figures in uniforms not worn since 1830, each faceless, each holding a shovel. And as they moved, their heads turned in perfect unison toward the chapel, where the air had become too thick to breathe, and the stained glass windows wept blood. Below, in the dark of Ward H, Grace stood before the last door. It had no handle, no seams, just a surface smoother than stone, darker than iron, a surface that breathed, and across it 7 words burned faintly in white light. This is the name that opens me. She placed her hand on the door and spoke. In 1821, before Eastern State was built, the ground was surveyed for faults. None were found, except a strange cavity beneath what would become the rotunda, a space with no natural formation. Inside it, the surveyor found a well, perfectly round. But there was no water, only a mirror at the bottom, and around that mirror, teeth. He didn't report it, but his journal, sealed and buried in the library archives, was recovered during renovations in 1984. His final entry, "It knows my name." Grace spoke, and the door heard, not her voice, not her language, but her meaning, her totality, because the prison had taken all of her, memories, dreams, fears, her voice, her hands, her name, and reassembled her, not as a prisoner, not as a guard, but as a keystone, the final one, the only one left to be placed. The door opened inward. Inside, a chamber made of mirrors, but none showed her reflection. Each mirror showed someone else: Nina, Marcus, Kyle, Michael Day, even the tour guide Chelsea, even the architect John Haviland, even the striped man, though in the mirror he wept. And in the final mirror, directly ahead, was a face with no features, just a mouth, wide, too wide. And it spoke. "Now we know your name, and now you'll know ours." The room went black. At the same time, above ground, everyone inside the prison fell to their knees, not in pain, in submission. Their mouths moved without control, chanting, "The name is not spoken. The name is remembered. The name is the wall. The wall is the name." And the bricks began to shift again. The entire structure of Eastern State reformed itself, folding in on its center like a dying star. Hallways stretched, cell blocks spiraled, and at the apex, the rotunda split open, exposing the well from 1821. Now deeper, lined in mirrors, filled with names. Too many to count. One name at the center. Yours, because you've heard it all. You've listened. You've remembered. You've carried the spiral in your thoughts, and the prison remembers you now. The final message appeared at dawn, written across every cell door, burned into the bricks, etched on every mirror. 7 words. You have always been behind the walls, and in the center of it all, where Grace once stood, a new name has appeared, not hers, yours. The last brick, the last echo, the last door. One part remains. The spiral must finish where it began, beneath the tower, behind the stone, where the prison breathes with your memory, where you become the story, where you become the walls. There is no longer a clear boundary between outside and in. No difference between visitor and inhabitant, between living and listening. Eastern State Penitentiary has shed its shell of brick and limestone. Its spiral now stretches across dreams, across mirrors, across you. It no longer needs permission to grow, because you gave it that when you listened, when you heard your name whispered from behind the wall. You didn't notice it at first, did you? That ache behind your ears after part 3. The flicker in the corner of your screen during part 7. The moment you thought, just for a second, that someone was standing behind you while reading part 9. Don't worry, that's not possession, that's permission. The spiral has simply reached you now. The wall beneath the tower opened, not with force, not with sound, but like a petal unfolding in reverse, and behind it, a passage. Cracked stone, impossibly dry, lined with writing in a language no tongue could speak, because it was never meant to be spoken aloud. Only remembered. At the end of that hall, a chamber. And in that chamber, Grace, or what remained of her. She no longer moved with flesh. She was an outline, burned into the air. Her eyes mirrored your eyes. Her mouth mirrored your breath. And from her chest, a voice you've never used, but remember hearing, spoke. The wall isn't just a prison. It's a mouth. And every mouth needs a story to chew on. The striped man entered behind her, slow, reverent. He bowed to her, but not out of obedience, out of recognition. She placed her hand to his chest and pulled out a key, the last one. It glowed black. It didn't shine. It absorbed. And across its surface, just one word, yours. Back in the rotunda, the 7 who came before knelt in a circle. Marcus, Nina, Kyle, Chelsea, Michael Day, the guide, the architect, and you. Don't be surprised. You were always part of this place, even before you arrived, even before you were born. They've been waiting for you to hear the story again, because that's how the walls grow stronger. Each retelling adds another layer of mortar, another heartbeat in the stone. In that final chamber beneath the penitentiary, where light doesn't travel and memory takes form like mold on a grave, Grace handed you the key. She didn't speak, but you understood. You were meant to open it. The last door. The one that doesn't exist until you imagine it. You turned the key. There was no lock, no door, no resistance. And yet it turned, and the prison shuddered. From every wall, a voice emerged, but not in unison, in layers. Each wall had its own voice, its own tone, its own memory. One wall remembered the first man to go mad from silence. Another remembered a child buried beneath the chapel floorboards in 1863. One remembered the rat that chewed off its own face, and one, deep beneath the foundation, remembered you, your voice, your eyes, your silence. Because silence is the one thing you gave willingly, and the prison needs silence more than it needs blood. The spiral tightened. The names bled into names. The past bled into the now. And the walls whispered a final message. You are the ending we needed. You are the final brick. Close us. And so, you did. You sealed the spiral with your attention, with your memory, with your belief. And the wall smiled. They'll say Eastern State is just a ruin. They'll say it's a museum, a monument, a relic of an old philosophy, of failed isolation, of Gothic fear. But you know better. You've heard the heartbeat in the stone. You've felt the door open behind your spine. You've seen the name carved on your chest when you sleep. Because once the story finishes you, you finish the story. That's how the prison grows. One story at a time, one reader at a time. One echo, becoming a wall. The cameras now run endlessly. The rotunda lights flicker in sequences that form words in Morse code. Visitors don't realize it, but they're walking a ritual path. Their steps feeding memory, their laughter sealing names. No one walks through Eastern State by accident, not anymore. And those who hear the story really hear it, never leave completely. Look at your reflection. Do you see it? Just a flicker, just for a second. The crack in the mirror forming diagonally, a breath fogging the glass that didn't come from your lungs. It's already begun. The name has been remembered. The wall is ready. Now ask yourself, when did you stop reading the story? And when did the story start reading you? There's still one part left. The wall behind the stone still breathes, and the final key, the invisible one, is still turning. If you're ready, say the word. The spiral is waiting. This is the part you were never supposed to reach. The part most don't read. The part most can't. Because by now, the story should have already replaced something inside you. Your memory of other stories, your certainty of self. A small trade, a silent one. And if you're still here, that means you kept too much of yourself. The spiral didn't take, not fully. So now, the wall must adjust. It must go deeper. Eastern State Penitentiary has grown in ways no blueprint could explain. Beneath its original 7 wings, beneath Ward G and the secret halls of Ward H, lies something older, unmapped, undocumented. Even the striped man does not enter here, because this place is not for the forgotten. It is for the remembered too well, those whose names couldn't be buried, whose stories wouldn't fade, the ones who refused to vanish. This place is called the wall within the wall. It has no physical entrance. You do not walk into it. You fall into it, through memory, through voice, through the story itself. And here, only one face exists, yours. You wake up in a narrow corridor. But something is wrong. There are no doors, no windows, just walls, smooth, pulsating faintly, like flesh that remembers cold hands. You reach forward. Your hand sinks into the stone. It parts around you, welcoming, not like liquid, not like air, like dreamed fabric, familiar, comforting, unforgiving. From behind you, a voice, your voice. You read your way into this, didn't you? You listened too carefully, remembered too hard. Now the wall remembers you. You turn, but the corridor is gone. Only the spiral remains, not drawn, not carved, moving, turning beneath your feet, pulling you inward. Your thoughts become names, your breath becomes bricks, and your heartbeat matches the prison's now. One sound, one structure. In 1830, before the prison opened to its first inmate, a worker, name erased from all records, was said to have disappeared while carving out the final foundation blocks beneath what would become cell block 4. The only thing left behind was his pickaxe and his fingernails, pressed into the stone, not scratched into it, pressed, like absorbed. He never had a file. But on some nights, visitors claimed to hear someone just behind the walls of cell 4, breathing in rhythm with their own. And if they stay still enough, they feel their ribs ache, like the wall is trying to make room for someone else. Now you know why. Back in the rotunda, the spiral has stopped turning. The striped man stands still. The others, those who came before, kneel, hands over faces, shaking in unison. Because something has entered the wall that should not be there. You were supposed to read, not sink. You were supposed to listen, not become. But the prison was greedy. It took too much. And now, you're not entirely inside, but you're not entirely out either. In the wall within, the wall, mirrors now form around you, but they don't show reflections. They show beginnings. Your first fear, your first lie, the first name you ever forgot, each pane a brick in your memory, each one whispering, "We are your story now. We have taken your voice. You will speak only what we give you." And when you try to scream, the only sound that escapes is, "Come in," over and over and over. Above ground, tourists gather at the rotunda, but no one notices the new etching on the floor, because no one can look directly at it. It slides away from your gaze like a shadow on water. But if you glance just right, just wrong enough, you see it, a perfect outline of you, facing away, mouth slightly open, one hand outstretched, and where your eyes should be, two closed doors. In 1970, 1 year before Eastern State shut down, a priest was brought in, unofficially. He performed no exorcism, no rites. He simply sat in cell 88 for 6 hours, and when he left, he whispered to the warden, "You built a throat, not a prison. And every soul you threw in, it just made it hungrier." He refused to return, but he left behind a note. When the story finishes itself, the wall will move. It will walk. It's walking now, through you. Can't you feel it? The edges of your thoughts warping, the breath behind your eyes slowing, the strange hunger in your fingertips. You're not possessed, you're not haunted, you're just becoming the structure. Another room, another hallway, another cell with no door, no light, no time. But a name, always a name, yours. And here, in the final descent, as the wall swallows your last unspoken memory, you see it. At the end of the spiral, a single mirror, black, silent, not reflecting, waiting. Grace is there. She doesn't speak. Because you are Grace now. You were always Grace. And behind her stands the striped man. He holds the final brick. And it is your story, still unfinished, still wet. He steps forward, places it in the wall, and for the first time in centuries, Eastern State Penitentiary exhales. The echo dies. The spiral is closed. The memory is sealed. The wall is full. And your name is no longer needed, because you are not you. You are what comes next. One part remains, just one. The gate is sealed, but the key still burns. Would you like to turn it? Would you like to finish? Say, continue. The stone is listening. There is no heartbeat anymore. Not yours, not the prison's. Because now they are the same, merged, unified, still, but not silent. Silence was only ever the bait. What comes next is not silence. It is language. The wall no longer whispers. It speaks. Above, Eastern State's crumbling Gothic shell still stands. To the passerby, it's just a historical site. But below, inside, a new architecture has grown. Not built with brick, but with recognition. Corridors shaped like memories. Chambers filled with former names. The spiral no longer curls in on itself. It expands outward. And what was once confined is now seeking. When the final brick was placed, your story. The last of the original 7 was sealed. 7 prisoners, 7 doors, 7 watchers. Grace, Marcus, Nina, Kyle, Michael Day, the guide, you. But the spiral feeds on more than names. It feeds on understanding. And now it has yours. In the wall. Within the wall, the mirrors fall, one by one, each shattering into echoes, fragments of what you once believed was real, your first nightmare, the hallway you never returned to, the voice you heard behind your childhood door. All memories, all blueprints, used to construct you into a place. The striped man no longer carries keys. He has become the door. You can see it now. The crown of rusted locks circling his head was never for control. It was to contain the story, to keep it from escaping, to keep you from escaping. But that is no longer necessary, because you aren't trying to escape anymore, are you? You're trying to understand. In 1842, an anonymous letter was sent to the Eastern State Board of Inspectors, a single sentence written on skin. You didn't build a prison, you uncovered it. The letter was dismissed as a hoax, but the skin matched no known person. It was preserved in formaldehyde until 1931. Then it disappeared, until now. Because that same phrase appeared last night, tattooed on your palm, even if no one else sees it, even if you don't look. You'll feel it next time you place your hand against any wall. In the chamber beneath the rotunda, where the final breath was exhaled, something remains. A book, unbound, pages still being written. You are reading from it now, and soon you will write for it, not with pen, not with voice, but with memory, all of it. The hallway in your dreams you never reach the end of, the phone call that never comes, the fear of being watched when you're alone. Those aren't yours, they're chapters, waiting for their rooms to be built. Because you are no longer the reader, you are the material. Eastern State is no longer bound by geography. It now exists in every place where the spiral has been told. Every screen, every wall, every dream, every reader. And in each of those places, a crack is forming. Hairline at first, a hairline crack in a wall you pass by every day. Soon, it will widen. And soon, the whisper behind it will say, "We've been building you. You're ready." Above, in the prison's empty corridors, the mannequins are all gone. The recordings play in reverse, and the audio logs all say the same thing when played backward. "Thank you for remembering me." The final mirror shows no face, just a door, and a question etched in fog. Are you still you? You know the answer. That's why you're still reading. That's why the spiral let you reach this far. Because you said yes. But the wall heard no. So here we are, the final corridor. The last breath in the stone. A hallway shaped like a thought you haven't had yet. It leads to the first room, built before language, before time, before crime. And inside, one thing. A chair, made of bone and regret, facing a wall. No mirror, no crack, just a surface that waits to reflect what you've become. And as you sit, the wall opens, and the story steps through. Not written, not spoken, just felt. By everyone who hears it, by everyone who joins it, by everyone who listens long enough to be built into it. And now, the spiral asks, are you ready to be remembered? If so, there is one final word to say. Say it, and the last wall will open. Say, continue, because when the prison speaks again, it will be with your voice. There are no endings in a place made of stories. Only closures mistaken for silence. Only walls mistaken for limits. Only you still thinking you are outside the spiral. But you've read too far, spoken too little, remembered too well. The wall has no use for the people who leave. It wants the ones who stay, the ones who listen with their breath, the ones who see the shapes behind the words, the ones who, even now, aren't sure if they've been reading or reciting. The final gate has no inscription, no number, no symbol, because numbers are for those who want to count the haunted. Symbols are for those who still believe doors have keys. But the final gate, the gate without a name, does not open from outside. It opens when you know it was never locked. You are inside it now. Look around. The space is shaped like your thoughts. The floor is soft, not stone, not dirt, but something like ashes. Walls breathe with your pulse, and the ceiling is gone entirely, replaced by a skylight so dark it reflects only your fears. Every echo here is something you forgot to be afraid of. The sound of your childhood home at night. The hum of a machine in a hospital you never visited. A lullaby you never learned but somehow remember. In this place, you are not alone. You never were. The chairs are filled now. 7 figures sit in silence. Grace, Marcus, Nina, Kyle, Michael, the guide, and you. Each wearing a different version of your face. Each breathing at a slightly different rhythm. Each whispering, in time. Close the spiral. Not because it ends, but because it's time to begin again. The striped man enters last. But he is not dressed in stripes anymore. He wears your clothes now, your face. He speaks in your voice. The story isn't about what happened. It's about what you believed would never happen. And what you let in when you stopped resisting the idea that maybe the prison wasn't built to keep people in. Maybe it was built to keep something out. And now that thing is you. Your name is no longer your own. It echoes back when you say it, not as sound, but as a corridor forming behind your lips. Each syllable lays another brick, each thought a turn in the hall. You're not speaking, you're constructing, and behind you, others are entering now. Through the cracks in their mirrors, through the pauses in their dreams, through the spiral left on the backs of their eyes. And what do they see? They see a figure standing at the center of Eastern State's true heart. Not the rotunda, not cell block 12, not ward G or H, but you. You are the foundation stone now. Every time someone hears the story, your name pulses brighter in the wall. You are the story. You are the gate. You are what's waiting on the other side. And there in the silence that follows, in the darkness that shudders just before it speaks, again, you realize there is no wall. There never was. Just memory, stacked like stone, shaped into guilt, and sealed with names. But there is one final shape, one door left unopened, the one behind your own eyes, the one that only opens when you forget you're watching, when you finally ask, was this always about me? And the spiral answers, no, but now it is. Eastern State is not a building anymore. It is an idea, an echo, a network of fear and memory and belief. And it is growing in every whispered story, in every cold hallway, in every person who dares to ask what it means to be haunted. There is one part left, one final breath, one final sound. It will not be written. It will not be spoken. It will be felt. And you will know it because you already do. You've always known. Now, if you are ready, if you're still here, say it with no sound. And the last door will open forever. There is no need to knock. The door has already opened. You were never outside it. You were the last passage, the final turn in the spiral, the breath the prison needed to exhale. And now, the story is complete. But Eastern State Penitentiary is not finished. It never finishes. It only waits for another name, another listener, another wall to build inward. You are not the end. You are the blueprint for what comes next. You are the next voice behind the stone.